heard you say before that this was the most important show of your life.
By far, yeah.
Like, what is that? Why do you say that?
I probably worked on the show the longest. You know, it's the most connected and invested with all parts of my practice, from music to film, to activism, to sculpture, to installation, to experience. And you know, I like to say that I've been practicing my whole career for this show.
So this is massive. Massive. And it's crazy because this is my first time seeing it, and I have been with you nearly 6 years now through the Hot Museum show, and now here at MASMOCA, the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. No FaceTime, no Zoom, no Instagram tag, no photo could do this justice. And I just really remember the meeting that you had with Congressman John Lewis, and not knowing what would come even sort of the year and a half to 2 years after that of his life. And I'm sitting right next to you, weeping, hearing him tell you the story of Sunday, Bloody Sunday, and telling you what it meant for him then, but also what it meant for him in the now and what we were dealing with. So can you talk a little bit about that moment and that becoming a major part of the journey to here?
Yeah, no, I think that that was end of the first chapter to set up what became this show. The moment you're referring to was when I first got invited to have dinner with Jerry Adams, who was the president of Sinn Féin at the time, and spoke to a small group of us in Los Angeles about Bloody Sunday in Derry in Northern Ireland. And I remember first, when I was a young kid, you know, hearing the song Sunday Bloody Sunday for the first time and wondering, why was this Irish guy singing about Selma? Because in the US, the recollection of the term Bloody Sunday comes from John Lewis and comes from Selma. So come to find out after, a quick time, short research, you find out that there was an event in Ireland as a young person. I learned that, and then fast forward to, post-college, me meeting Jerry and learning more directly and understanding that you can read about change in a book, you can hear about change, from other people's stories, and then when you meet someone who was on the front line of it, and you hear something in their voice recollects the passion of that moment and their role as a witness to that moment, and then their role as a caretaker of those stories and bringing those stories back. It was a very powerful moment for me. And fast forward to you helping us meet Congressman John Lewis, who you've known for many, many years, and hearing that his version of that story from Selma in the same way, telling us that story like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
It was everything about not only just what it meant and the symbolism, but also understanding that his command of that moment, from how he behaved the afternoon before, to how he spoke about it in the moments after, to how he spoke about it in the decades after. Those are things that really, I think, landed on me and landed on us in a very powerful way, because we are stewards of this moment, and we are stewards of our stories. And then my inspiration was to combine those stories together, because I felt it could not be a coincidence. It was not a coincidence that there are two tragic events, that are about equality, and social justice on other sides of the globe.
Yeah.
That were both called Bloody Sunday. And it's also not coincidence that it happens on a Sunday, a religious day where working people have the ability to congregate and stand up for something in that way. And that became the inspiration for this show and telling that story.
And so what are we seeing now?
So these are maps of cities where all these protests that we just saw have occurred, starting off with Selma, and then that's Derry. And these are all places around the world, shadows cut out of the postcards that map just the different geographies with arrows that point to each other and make these like shadow cartographies that connect us all. When I went to Derry for the first time to do a site visit, I went to a place called the Museum of Free Derry, and I turned the first corner, and right there's a photo of Dr. King, super big, and with the story of the American Civil Rights Movement. I said, well, that's amazing that they're connected. And then in further research for this show, we found out the depth of that collaboration, where civil rights leaders from Ireland and the American South were going back and forth and teaching each other, song and story. And all of that was very powerful. And I felt in this moment where we, as a society, feel that our story is like one of the last things we own, to have these incredible moments of sharing story, I think was what this is all about. So each dent represents a victim of Bloody Sunday, and then the lighting makes the stars on the ground.
What I'm really curious about is hearing Congressman Lewis speak, and I've heard him tell that story. We all have thousands of times, but it was something really special, and maybe because we were such in an intimate space, as if we were there with him on that day.
Yeah.
And you talk about Jerry Adams speaking about it in sort of in the same way over dinner, but then you find this connectivity, right? This lineage, and that's why I really do believe we have so much more in common than we do apart. So really this connectivity of movements. And all of these leaders that we study, there is something that connects their sort of end goal. What do you think that is that allows you even to connect two different stories at two different parts of history, but in some capacity has a similar goal in mind?
Yeah, I think that the thing about that connectivity for me, and really what I tried with our team to articulate in this project, is equality is a commonality, right? Like individuality is actually not. And I think what is actually some of the connective tissue is that whether it's Northern Ireland, whether it's Selma, whether it's Occupy, whether it's the Women's March, all of those movements are about putting the collective us before the individual I. That is something that we can all aspire to together. And equal for one person in one part of the world is the same thing as equal in somewhere else. It just means the same. It means treat us in a similar manner, see us in a similar manner. And so that is my hope for our own connectivity, because while we all try to express our individuality, we can still hope for equality. And I think people think that that's an either or, but if our goals are different and through that expression of our difference, we can still find ourselves to view each other as equals, I think that we have a noble goal to aspire to.
And one of the things that's interesting for me around movements and movement leaders is no leader has seen the end of a movement. I think about just history and legacy, and it's really not more so, oh, damn, I wish they could have saw, I wish Martin Luther King could have saw Obama.
Yeah.
I wish John Lewis could see us beat all these voter suppression bills. But it's really more so around reconciliation with a lot of things that may have been left undone, may have been left unsaid, with folks that were left before and you weren't able to have that conversation. And so I think about the Lord Mountbatten shelf. That's, when you first walk into the exhibit. Can you tell the story first of that, but then also your decision of making it a piece of this show?
Yeah, so the story is the paradox of the assassination of Lord Mountbatten, which is what you're referring to, was that the IRA in 1979, detonated a bomb on a boat, and that killed Lord Mountbatten, as well as several members of his family. It was both the highest profile murder, in the history of the IRA. It was one of the more controversial, if not the most controversial murder. But also, Lord Mountbatten was one of the few members of the British government at the time that actually had a sympathetic understanding of the case for equality. In the same way that the IRA had succeeded in their largest victory, in a way it was contradictory because they had, assassinated not a supporter, so to speak, but an ear that was a more thoughtful ear than let's say other people in the government. And that was a paradox, and I think that one of the things that was important for me to discuss in this show is that making change is not only is it not easy, there are casualties because inherently when someone wants to make change, there is a status quo that doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
What I wanted for this show is to not overly romanticize this notion of change, which is why what we did for this show was built a ship that was reminiscent of the vessel that Lord Mountbatten was in, which was called the Shadow 5. But the sculpture is shaped into an Ouroboros, a snake that eats its own tail, a regeneration. And in this ship, the ship crashes into itself itself, and the pieces from the ship are floating around the space, creating their own shadows and their own microcosms, their own universe and galaxy. You know, the idea being that for every movement that we have, there's the push and pull of consequence, and there's no easy victory. We are on the side of social change for justice, but again, it's change for a reason, you know, and it's change because what the other side of change is people who don't want it to change. I think one flaw in the movement that I see that we always discuss, you know, it's easy to market yourself on the side of change, you know, but it's sort of like, well, if everybody wants change, how come it's not changed? You know, we are ignoring the forces that don't want to change. And I think that ignoring the voices and ignoring the emotions and ignoring the inertia there, you know, is very risky. And I think that was what's caused the last 5 years, you know, of reactionary politics, because we have then done to others what we did not want to be done to us, which is we have ignored them, and we have made that parity invisible. And I think that's what this is about.
I totally agree with that, because I feel that in many spaces, we decide to talk to people only who agree with us and who are going to give us snaps of what we say. I always felt like just doing the right thing, doing good with the intention of making life better for other folks. I make this, you know, somewhat of the joke that it was only until I got shot in the face, now everybody calls me an activist.
They won't let us leave. You're boxed in all around.
I feel like I just got up and knew when someone asked, where were you?
Yeah.
I didn't want to say I was at home watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And I think about the kids in high school who in 1963 in Birmingham decided to go out, and their parents and everybody told them, don't go out there because you're going to get in trouble. But they was like, all my friends are out there, so I'm going to go. And not knowing that they were going to be a part of this historical moment that saw hoses and dogs and stuff like that on them that would change the course of history. It's like I went out there and ended up getting shot in the face. You know, and not knowing I was going to be a part of that history of that day, of that moment that they call Freedom Summer in 2020. But then you called me and decided that we would begin another chapter of what this show will become.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, it's precisely that moment. And you know, I think what we both do is we are both very sensitive to the moment. And I think that one thing that I think that we spend a lot of time doing is trying to be sensitive to the moment. You know, and not only in the case of not wanting to be at home watching TV when the world's changing around you, which, you know, we're very careful of to make sure we're not, but I think that seeing that moment, my mind and my energy immediately went to transformation. Not only for your own psychological, you know, well-being as a, you know, friend, mentor, and whatever, and someone who loves you, but for the world. I was not going to sit down and let the story, your story, be punctuated with being a victim and not having that be a source of transformation. You know, if there was ever a sign, you know, of what that moment could be, as dark as that was the sign that we needed to listen to, and that did set off another chapter, which was incredible.
It's a crazy chapter. And the interesting thing I think about is another mentor of mine was saying to be careful of how you allow people to direct you in this moment. It was very interesting in the sense of me not really knowing what to do and what this meant for my life. I was healing, my face was gashed in, like so much was happening. And when you called me to ask me to do the song Sunday Bloody Sunday, one of the things outside of me singing it was the response to it. The response to it actually made me really sit in the power of each of us to affect change in a massive way. For me, I had this traumatic experience happen we created Sunday Buddy Sunday. And for everybody, it won't be that traumatic. But in talking to the curator here, Denise, she was saying that 300,000 to 500,000 people can walk through here over the course of the year. And I wonder, what's your message to those folks?
Well, there's a lot of messages. You know, the way I think of my artwork, you know, is more about asking questions than giving answers. Because I think the answers for a lot of these things are personal and individual, and I think that the best thing a good artwork can do is ask questions. And I think one of the questions that this whole project is intended to ask is, where do I fit in? You know, and I think that one of the ways that we tried to orchestrate this show is to create moments of actual inclusivity, where your shadow is textured with drawings and shadows that we make, you know, that reflect generations of civil rights actions. And I think the second part, though, for you, and seeing the video, which is the second beat of the show, so to speak, is really about resilience. You know, and I think that what we show in a 4-minute video is a young man on the streets, standing up for what he thinks is right. You know, we see that man shot. We see that man recovering in a hospital, and next thing you know, we see him on stage, we see him performing, you know, and we see him transforming a song that is a hit song that, you know, resonates with everything in this whole show. And then you hit the refrain, how long must we sing the song? And we communicate that with John Lewis talking about how long must we be patient. The intention there is to show resilience. There's a resilience in John Lewis's question, how long must we, you know, be patient, and you singing, how long must we sing this song?
How long must we sing this song?
With a circular instrument that just goes on in circles called revolutions. The question is, are we resilient enough to sit through and do what it takes to see as much of the change as we can until we pass the baton to the next generation and have them walk in circles too? Because again, this is the thing where I also believe, and this is what this show is trying to maybe propose, which is it's never going to be done. We will never see the end of our movements because you always have to fight for equality. And so again, it's really, where do I fit in, and can we as a society be resilient enough? You know, and that's why I think it hits so many people so hard after they see this show, and they, you know, turn the corner and they see you, and then they break down in tears, because everything here is abstracted through shadow, and then they turn the corner and they see the exact same structure, you know, of a story being told, you know, that they just saw over 26 minutes. They see it in 4 minutes, and they see it in a person.
Yeah.
On Sunday, another Sunday.
Whoa. Majestic. This entire thing. Because it's not over.
Yeah.
You know, it's not over. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.